and a lot of time just bring up a matter, and then someone in my family in the generation that were born in the 1960s, 1950s would say, you have no clue what we've been through. Your problems are nothing compared to ours. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. And then all the problems and the challenges will get tucked away
swept under the rug.
Under the rug, yeah, that's right. And then I can never screw it back.
Right.
I don't dare to.
How dare you complain about your life and feeling sad? You have so much, you have so many opportunities. You know, it's okay for people to want to share with and educate their parents about psychology and how things are changing. But it's okay to accept that that's not your job. And we can just let the previous generations be as they are. Every generation in every country around the world and every culture evolves a little bit beyond the last one.
That's right.
And openness to mental health is an example of how that's happening right now in Vietnam. And it's beautiful that young people are more open and more that they have courage to share.
Xin chào tất cả các bạn, chào mừng các bạn đã quay trở lại với Optimal 365, nơi mà chúng ta sẽ cùng nhau chia sẻ kiến thức để bảo vệ sức khỏe tinh thần và thể chất. Mình là host Từ Ân và hôm nay Ân rất là vinh hạnh được quay trở lại cùng trò chuyện với giáo sư Nathan Gellert. Hiện giờ Nathan đang giảng dạy tại trường đại học Fulbright và buổi trò chuyện ngày hôm nay chúng ta sẽ hoàn toàn nói chuyện bằng tiếng Anh, nên vui lòng mọi người hãy mở phụ đề lên nhé. Thank you, Nathan, for coming back to the show. I'm so happy that we are going to have a very interesting topic to discuss today. But first of all, let's could you please tell the audience a little bit about your background, so that the new audience come to our show get to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, Tuan, thank you so much for having me back. And it's been fun watching your show grow on social media and online. And I just have a deep appreciation for the work that you're doing to promote awareness and knowledge about mental health in Vietnam.
Thank you so much.
So I'm Nathan Gellert, and I'm a professor of psychology at Fulbright University, Vietnam. And I'm also the founder of a new startup company called the Vietnam Institute of Psychology. And we provide direct mental health care services and then also B2B support for businesses and schools and wellness and well-being.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to come and visit your company and know more about the purpose and what makes you start the business.
So I think there's two reasons. The first is that I have 17 years of experience practicing as a mental health counselor. All of that's been in the United States. And now for the last 2 years, I've been living and working in Vietnam. And part of my mission in transitioning my life here is thinking about the cross-cultural integration of theories and ideas from the West into Vietnam. And, I can read about that in textbooks, but the most important thing for me if I'm teaching the next generation of psychologists and counselors is to have my own experience working as a mental health counselor, a psychotherapist here. And so starting the business allows me to treat people here, have clients, provide services for individuals, couples, families.
I think we all need that very much. Yes.
Thank you. And the second piece, 2 years ago, we were graduating our first year of graduates at Fulbright University. And just going around a room of psychology graduates and asking where they were working. And everybody was a little anxious about where they could get a job. And because psychology is such a new field, there are a few great agencies and organizations to work at, but there's not enough for everybody. And I saw that need of creating a really high-end, professional, ethical company where we can employ graduates from Fulbright University and other universities and help them in their continued professional growth. And I also want to encourage students to go to the US or other countries and study in those really excellent education systems, and then have a place for them to have a job when they come back.
Thank you so much. That is so beautiful.
Yeah,
That
thank
is so
you.
beautiful, because a lot of time when people talk about we built a startup, people would ask, how do you want to grow the business? But here, your main purpose is to provide a place for your students to practice after school. And that's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing that.
You're welcome.
Now, please let me know, why Vietnam? Why?
That's a good question.
Why it's here?
Yeah.
And what is your plan for the future with the new startup?
Maybe that's a long story, but
Yeah.
there's a couple of pieces that I would highlight. Growing up and in my young life, I lived abroad many times and with my family, and saw the beauty of the world and cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, geographical diversity. I love traveling, culture, people, food, nature. And I randomly had an opportunity in 2015 to come to Vietnam for the first time. I had never been to Southeast Asia, and do a little bit of teaching. And I was here for 3 weeks that first time, and just had a great connection with the psychology faculty at the University of Social Sciences and Humanities here in Ho Chi Minh City. And they invited me to come back the next year. And it became an annual and then biannual trip that I was making here. And seeing the need here in the field of psychology and mental health, so much stigma, too few practitioners, the need for great educational services to train the next generation of psychologists and counselors. And I saw that I could have a huge impact here. That I could bring, the little bit of knowledge that I have, the little expertise that I have. If I stayed in America, the impact's small because there's a lot of people providing help and support there. But coming here, I could make that big difference. And then another piece that was really exciting for me professionally was the multicultural piece. I was very worried on my first trip here when I saw in the little library at USSH all the American textbooks that they were using to train psychology students at the university. So, hey, that's great. We've got a lot of knowledge, but Vietnam is a unique culture.
Exactly.
A unique history. And we can't just copy and paste from the West. And those conversations around cultural integration of theory and practice from the West, celebrating what's powerful and the kind of unique local cultural wisdom here, and integrating those two was, I guess, on an intellectual and also emotional level, very exciting for me as a professional.
Thank you so much for just submerge yourself into our culture and trying to make a difference. Now, going back to the whole mental health landscape, and also our last topic when we talk about social media and how it impacts our life daily.
Yeah.
I can't help but go home every single day, and I do research with people around me and go online, read more about it. I literally see people go online and scream out loud that they are lonely.
Yeah.
Why are we so lonely when we are so connected in so many ways?
Yeah.
And so many layers, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And I understand in the Western world, it's like sort of like an epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
But why now also in Vietnam, when you see people walking out on the street, you are next to someone. We are in very close proximity. Right? Physically, online, and multi-layer of all of that tools that we have to connect. But why do we have people that suffer depression and loneliness?
Yeah.
Why?
It is such a conundrum in our globally and easily connected world that people are so lonely. And I think I'm glad we're thinking about this in the Vietnamese context, because one of the beautiful things about Vietnamese culture that I've come to really love and embrace, and let's maybe start with this as a foundation for the problem, is community. In America, we're much more individualistic. And from a young age, you learn to speak up for yourself and to do what's best for yourself and advance and grow and challenge a teacher or challenge a coach or question your parents.
Very critical.
That's encouraged. That critical thinking is encouraged, and we're all taught that. And there's some wonderful things about becoming an individual. In Vietnam, of course, there's this focus on the group and collectivism and the family. And, I see that in my Vietnamese friends' lives, with my Vietnamese girlfriend and her family, in communities, how important family is in that connection. So, there's that starting point that sounds great. But then we have, I think, this kind of abrupt meeting of two phenomenon that are happening because of economic development and urbanization. And those are social media and the process of urbanization, people leaving the countrysides in Vietnam.
That's right.
Coming into the big city. 20 years ago, nobody would have dared to leave their hometown. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it would have been a huge challenge in your family to think about leaving the hometown and going and pursuing opportunity on your own in some other city. And now that's normal. People are leaving the countryside, young people especially. And so they're disconnecting from their families.
Right.
And so there's a challenge there of being disconnected just from the foundational family unit. And then we match that with the rise of technology. And I think one of the things to remember about social media is nobody in those social media companies is interested in helping people connect with each other. They're actually interested in selling us advertisements. Selling ads. Showing us sponsored posts.
Right.
And because that's how they make money.
They have to.
The goal for those platforms is to keep us connected to our phones, showing us content. Of course, some of that comes from our families, but a lot of it comes from other places. And so we have this advent now of the fact that you can be sitting on the bus or walking down the street and everybody's looking at their phone. They're not connecting with each other. And there's that distraction there that's there all the time to keep us from connecting with the people that we're physically with, but maybe we're at the restaurant or at the dinner table and we're all on our phones and not actually connecting with each other.
Right. So I kind of know how to feel lonely. Like meaning I know the feeling of loneliness.
Sure.
Right. But can you put into a psychological term, can you describe it to me so that I can have a really clear understanding of that feeling?
Let's start with the psychological and the personality trait of introversion and extroversion. So some people prefer and kind of get their energy from being around other people. Like, for instance, I think you're a pretty extroverted person. You could tell me if I'm wrong about that.
Ambiverted.
Okay, you're right in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm more introverted, and I really need my alone time. I need my alone time to recharge. Mm-hmm. And I do love being around people. I love teaching. I love being in situations like this. But at the end of the day, I need to go home and have some alone time and recharge. So there's that psychological fact of where we get our energy, being around people or being on our own. Being alone is very different than loneliness. So loneliness is when we desire or wish for connection, but we can't have it or we don't have it. And so that could be literally, I don't have any friends and I'm feeling alone. I don't have family who wants to connect with me, and so I'm alone, and there's just an absence of connection that's available. Loneliness can also happen even if we are around other people. It's possible, for instance, in a marriage or a love relationship, for people to kind of fall out of love and feel very alone around their partner, even though their partner's sitting right next to them. That can also feel very lonely.
That can be very painful.
And it is painful. And so loneliness then connects with these other emotions of, as you said, painfulness, sadness. Over time, that can lead to depression. And then the challenge is once we become depressed, it becomes even harder to do the things that we need to do to have connection and to, quote unquote, fix the loneliness feeling, because fixing loneliness then takes effort. And when we're depressed, we don't have the energy.
When you're depressed, basically your body gives up, your mind gives up. And I think connection takes effort.
Yeah, it does.
Takes effort from both
Absolutely.
sides, actually.
Right.
Based on my research, I find that young people nowadays, they find that boost of dopamine online.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, to me, when it comes to connection, it's not just peer-to-peer, just one-to-one anymore. It's a community, right? You find connection in a community. And for young people, I tend to see they would go online and find their own community online. Maybe they go to a coffee shop with a bunch of friends, or maybe still be on their phone, for example.
Right.
That's how I observe. But for older generation a little bit, my millennials or people who were born in the year 1980s, 1970s, I feel like they're an epidemic of people just don't have the connection with their own children.
Mm-hmm.
Or after a long period of time, they've been through failures, or they've been through some very unfortunate events in their life, and they completely withdraw from the outside world.
Yeah.
So how do you identify that member in your community or in your family? And it's because sometimes people just don't tell you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you identify, and how do you offer help?
That's a great question. So, one of the challenges in Vietnam right now in the field of mental health and well-being is the stigma around talking openly about mental health. The idea of saving face is a big driving force in that. Nobody wants to admit that there's something wrong with me, that I'm depressed, that I'm anxious. And so those feelings aren't shared often. And you're right. Then it's hard to identify who's the person who maybe needs support. Mm-hmm. I think what I encourage everyone to do is to be brave, and all of us should share openly in our friend circles and our families about how we're actually doing. Mm-hmm. How am I feeling today? Am I overwhelmed? Am I stressed? Am I feeling sad about something at work? The more I talk about those things, the more you talk about them, the more willing people around us are to share their struggles.
Oh, so just have open communication.
Yes.
Right. Also, I feel like there are not that many people would have the patience to listen to you, for example, right? So how do we equip ourselves with that open-minded mindset that it's okay for somebody comes to you and have the patience to be there and listen? How do we build that community? What are the factors? Can you let me know so that I can also apply that into my company, for example, so that we can create that environment for our employees to have open communication about their feeling?
I think there's a few things we can do to kind of build that, those strong communities, be them at work or in our home families, where we can have those deep levels of connection and trust. The first thing when it comes to sharing is to, I think, start with small pieces. If you're not sure who to trust and who will listen, start sharing small things. See who shows up to be available and to reciprocate with sharing themselves. If people rebuff and sort of push away those bids for deeper connection, that's not somebody who's interested. And then I think the other thing to do, if we're wanting to be on the other side, be the one who's trusted that people will come to, is, again, to share our own struggles and openness that broadcasts and advertises to other people, I'm willing to talk about this. And then to also look for signs and kind of guesses of people around us who we think need help. Have you noticed that there's that employee at work who is withdrawn a little bit? Mm-hmm. Maybe instead of eating lunch with the team, they're sitting alone at their desk eating lunch. noticing behavioral signs, people who look tired, people who look stressed, when people change their habits, maybe somebody who's going to the gym regularly is not doing that anymore, or they have stopped a hobby that was important to them, and ask them, just check in, how you doing? No, how are you really doing? I'm curious. I see this change.
That's beautiful. I think it's really important for us to really have that awareness, mindfulness mindset, to observe people around us just a little bit. Everyone is busy. For me, for example, I realize as I grow a little bit older, I tend not to pay so much attention of what's going on online, but instead divert that energy and attention to people around me. Instead of, who has what online, what's going on with their life online. I genuinely just feel like I need to pay attention to the people in my own little community, my family, and observe what's going on with their life. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. The other thing is to take care of ourselves and to recognize that it does take energy to support other people. Let me share a little example with you. Week and a half ago at Fulbright, I went up to the water fountain to refill my water bottle, and a student came up and was kind of in line behind me as I was filling mine. I just said, "Hey, how's the semester ending for you?" And she said, "Oh, it's not good." And this was right as my water bottle was filling, and I had a meeting to go to, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Semester's almost over. It'll be break soon." And I walked away. And I felt so bad about that response. I brushed it off because I was busy. I was in a rush. And at the end of the day, I really wished that I had realized this was the important moment, not my meeting. I can be 5 minutes late for a meeting. This was a young student, a young woman who looked really sad and overwhelmed. And I wasn't there, and I could have said, "I'm so sorry. What's going on? Is there anything I can do to help?" And I did that because I was busy, a little overwhelmed myself. And so if we want to be that person who cares for and supports others, we have to be mindful of our own tendencies to
Time,
energy, balancing all that.
So you said earlier, being alone and just genuinely happy being alone, that is not lonely. Loneliness is the urge of connection to people.
And not having it. So having the urge and not having it.
Right. So how do you, and I think, for example, everyone is busy in life. And sometimes, like you said, and the incident that you just said earlier, when somebody reaches out to you and you just in that moment you just don't have the mind, the energy, and the time to just be there with that person.
Mm-hmm.
Then if I'm in that situation, for example, how do I build that muscle in a psychological muscle
yes.
to hang on tight and being alone and genuinely have, because I think that's necessary, right?
Yeah.
For everyone.
How to build the muscle of having the energy to support and connect with other people.
And just be for myself as well.
Right.
Right, because when you, for example, there are moments in life that you feel genuinely lonely. Mm-hmm. Like you urge for connection and you don't have it.
Yeah.
Right? And how do you overcome that? How do you but how do you get yourself out of that feeling? What can I do?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is always recognizing that there's a challenge there. I don't like to use the word problem. Challenge is better. Challenges create opportunities. Problems often, it's more negative framing. So I think a lot of times we don't notice until, I don't want to say it's too late, but it's late that we're really feeling lonely. Maybe we're months into this. And then it becomes much more challenging because the factors around us maybe are more complex and harder to fix. And so one thing that I just encourage all of us to do is have a mindfulness every day about how I'm doing. Meditation is a great tool for that. Journaling is a great tool for that, to help identify possible challenges that are coming up. If I notice that I'm beginning to feel lonely, it's much easier to resolve that early than it is later.
Right.
So mindfulness about it is important. And then once we identify loneliness, to start thinking about, what do we actually need? Is it that I'm missing my family? Is it that I don't have friends? Am I feeling lonely because people don't understand who I am? And then what can I do to resolve each of those different kind of causes of being lonely? And also recognizing that sometimes it's okay to ask for help, to get professional help, or to reach out to a friend or a loved one or a colleague and say, just honestly, hey, I'm feeling kind of lonely these days. Can we meet up?
Oh.
People say yes then, if we're honest about why we need it.
It's kind of, it's a little bit sad. I think people need courage to just even do something that small of it.
It's true.
It's sad.
Take mental health counseling, psychotherapy. When a new client comes in to see me, I try to tell them every time, every new client, this is a huge step that you took, just booking this appointment and showing up today. That first step is hugely difficult, admitting out loud to ourselves and to other people, I need help, I have a problem, something's not right here.
Yeah. And going back to having identified all of that emotions going through, and identify those first bits of getting to that path of loneliness. And at the end of the day, I think you do need a community. So based on your experience of 17 years being on both sides of the world, the Western world and here in Asia, especially in Vietnam, tell me about the differences in the support system of community in America and here. And tell me more about the story that you are here in Vietnam, and how community here shapes the mental health industry in general, and how communities here would help people. So given all the information that you just shared with me, how is it difference between America, the Western world, and here in a sense of community helping people get over loneliness?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking in America when I'm working with somebody, and these are general answers because everybody's different and the solution for everybody is unique. That's an important part of psychological care. But generalizing, in the West, if somebody's lonely, we might focus on staying busy. That's advice we often, I've heard that from my mom at different times in my life when I've felt lonely or depressed. Go do something, be busy. That's a very individualistic solution because it's just me being busy, filling time, occupying myself, doing things that I enjoy. It does work. It does work. It's a good piece of advice. In Vietnam, I think helping people reconnect with their communities and their families is extra important. It's important in the West too, but here extra important because the foundation of Vietnamese culture is the family.
It's beautiful.
And
generations.
Those generations. And so reminding people of the importance of spending time with family, reconnecting with family if you're feeling separated. Now, there's a challenge to this too that I see a lot, though, and this has to do with the stigma of mental health and also generational trauma. I hear a lot of times from young people who are feeling sad, feeling anxious, feeling lonely, and they try to share that with their parents. And you can guess what some of the parents' responses are. And I'm going to be just really blunt because I've heard this several times. The parent might say, your father and I, or your mother and your grandparents suffered so much during the war. We didn't have food, and I am not belittling those statements at all. It's true. That was traumatic. And what people now are experiencing with mental health can never compare to the trauma and the suffering of war and famine and poverty. And I'm not going to say but, I'm going to say and at the same time, the perspectives and the experience of especially young people who are exploring their mental health more, wanting to speak openly about it, that's the here and now, and it is also real. And so one of the things I find myself talking a lot about with younger clients is that sometimes some of those things are not actually safe to share with some people in our family because of that generational trauma that's there. And so helping them find other young people, other groups to connect with, to share in a safe place about that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful because I have been there.
Yeah.
I have been there, and
right.
And I always compare my matters, my problems with theirs, and then
Yes.
I never had the courage to bring it up ever again.
Of course.
And that happens to everyone I think mostly everyone in my generation. Yeah. And so it's really important to know that, like you said earlier in the episode, that identify the right, maybe people, community, so that you can share your matter and knowing that you will not be judged or have the guilt, just being guilty about just sharing your matters and being compared. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, it's okay for people to want to share with and educate their parents about psychology and how things are changing. But it's okay to accept that that's not your job. And we can just let the previous generations be as they are. Every generation in every country around the world and every culture evolves a little bit beyond the last one.
That's right.
And openness to mental health is an example of how that's happening right now in Vietnam. And it's beautiful that young people are more open and more that they have courage to share.
And having the expert like you here in our country and just being submersed into our country and culture and generally want to help and support not just the people but also the students in the industry is so important and beautiful. So thank you so much, Nathan, for doing the work that you do. So if you have just one advice for the audience today, what would that be to close up our episode today?
Yeah. I want to go back to the open sharing. We will never reduce the stigma of mental health if we don't all embrace openness and vulnerability in sharing about our own struggles. So if we can all, be them little things or big things, share with people we trust, share with our communities around us about our individual struggles, openly ask questions, genuinely, how are you doing? And notice you look tired today, is everything okay? Inquiring, that openness and that curiosity creates the kind of communities I think we all want to live in, where we don't have to feel shame about struggling in life.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And hopefully we will have more episodes together. And it's always my pleasure to have you back on the show. So see you on the next episode. And thank you so much for coming today. Cảm ơn tất cả các bạn đã theo dõi episode lần này đến những giây phút cuối cùng. Xin hẹn gặp lại các bạn vào những tập sau.